Hello, and welcome to Game Changer Live by Connor's Coaching. If you like what we bring, take a moment, if you don't mind, to log into YouTube, subscribe, and leave a comment on our channel to help us grow. We really appreciate it. But together, we create an inspired community that shares topics about neuroscience, positivity, coaching, personal development, mindset, and more. And we go live specifically so that you can see me stumble and fail because I believe strongly in what you see is what you get. I'm not going to give you the highest, most polished version of me. That's just not practical. That sets up unrealistic expectations for myself that I can't live up to. This is me unfiltered, and I hope that you enjoy what you see. We go live every Wednesday at 3:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And guests join us on the second and fourth Wednesday of each month. Let's get inspired today. My name is Daniel Connor. I'm a certified professional coach and a proud member of the International Coaching Federation. In fact, I just accepted a board position for my local chapter. And stuck people hire me when they're ready to get unstuck, to discover a more fulfilling and purposeful life, and so that every day they see a better version of themselves reflected in the mirror. In my last video, my last personal video, we had a guest last episode, but the episode before that, we talked about self-care. And I promised to talk about gift giving this month. That's this episode. Well, let me tell you, while I was researching for this episode, I saw so many similarities that this may sound like a repeat, but I think it's something that bears repeating. So buckle up because we're going to talk about gifts. Wrap your presents might have been a better turn of phrase. Who knows? We're talking about giving until it hurts, and there is a kind of trap that's in gift giving that I've seen in my own personal life that I want to talk about today in case someone else is struggling with it, how I recognize it in myself and how I overcome it. So, first of all, to those of you who are celebrating Christmas, Merry Christmas. I know that a lot of you would like to hear that at this time of year. For those of you who don't celebrate Christmas, happy holidays and season's greetings to you, sincerely. This weekend, we do celebrate Christmas in my cultural tradition. And it is a holiday that is centered around the giving of gifts, specifically towards each other. Yes, there's some religious symbology around it, but largely speaking, what I associate with Christmas is gift giving. The opportunity to give to other people, the opportunity to receive gifts from other people, and that has always been a very uncomfortable thing for me to experience. In fact, I would rather just skip the whole thing. I'm kind of a Grinch when it comes to gift giving. And the reason for that is all about today's episode. So, if you've been wondering why I don't like to participate in gift giving, this is about this is the reason today. So first of all, let's define giving, okay? Because it's not just about gifts, although that is the focus of the holiday. We're not just talking about giving gifts. Gifts are a form of giving. That would be presents wrapped, usually with a monetary value. Sometimes it's a nice, bit of food or something like that. It can also be spending time with people, quality time. It can be an affirmation of just telling someone how much they matter, especially written. And neurologically, there have been a lot of studies around reading a written, pre-written thank you and form of gratitude or an affirmation like that to someone else and how beneficial that can be positively to them. But also, it can be an act of service, and acts of service are really important in my family. We expressed love, I think, primarily in my family as acts of service. Things like making sure that you had a nice meal that you cooked or you spent some time cooking for someone else went way above and beyond than just giving them a present of some sort. especially with my grandmother and my mother. Acts of service for them, I think, were their primary form of showing love, and I think I inherited that from them. Um, and what is it about gift giving? And in case you're keeping score, in case you watched our last episode, yes, those are love languages. And that is not a coincidence. When we're talking about giving gifts, we're talking about an act of love that's expressed, right? So let's figure out what it is that makes giving gifts feel so good. Scientists have discovered specifically that there's a double boost of hormones that happen during the process of giving a gift and receiving a gift, both. In both cases, the hormones oxytocin and dopamine are released. You've heard me talk a lot about dopamine on this channel. In fact, it's my favorite neurochemical. But let's start with oxytocin, because oxytocin is the primary here. Oxytocin is the warm and fuzzy hormone. A lot of people call it the love hormone. It's a neuropeptide that's released by your hypothalamus. And it's specifically, we knew that for a long time that it was specifically triggered in women at childbirth, that it was a part of that mysterious process. It's only recently that we've discovered that it is central in all forms of human bonding, all forms of relationship building. So, what this hormone does is it builds on feelings of trust and safety and connection. It lowers our experience of stress and anxiety. It can regulate our emotional responses and pro social behaviors. It encourages those pro social behaviors, and that would include things like trust and empathy. Um, Prolonged gazing can cause this. So, like if you're gazing at someone that you do admire and you love, and you see their eyes kind of dilate, that actually may symbolize a significant release of oxytocin. Um, it can be positive memories, it can be bonding. It's also responsible for helping us process social cues, and it also helps encourage us to spend quality time and to repeat social interactions that we find positive, such as expressions of love through those love languages that we talked about: service, affirmation, physical affections, gifts, and quality time. So it's a good feeling hormone. And oftentimes we find with those good feeling hormones, the body is trying to get us to do things that feel good, right? Get us to do things that are in our best interest. We are a societal species. We love to be in tribes, right? So my theory here is that oxytocin is fundamental in the creation of human culture. The next hormone that is also released during gift giving is dopamine. And again, dopamine, my favorite hormone, is the enjoyment hormone. It's also the storytelling hormone. Specifically, dopamine has a reaction that happens when we're hearing a story and we're processing the events of a story. We're processing it on a dopamine level, which I think is really cool. Um, but it's also about those feelings of pleasure and enjoyment, of euphoria, ecstaticness, giddiness, those kinds of feelings. And this hormone really reinforces behavior. It's there so that we're encouraged to repeat very positive behavior that is in line with who we want to be and who we see ourselves as. If you set a goal and you achieve that goal, dopamine is released. One thing that dopamine does is it opens up your neural pathways to encourage you to learn and to create long term memory and pattern formation. My theory, not a scientist here, so I'm not going to test it, but my theory is that that is related to the storytelling aspect of it. That because we tell our history through oral tradition, that actually triggers that dopamine, kind of as an echo for retelling it through accessing memory. Regardless, gift giving, and I could wax poetically about the neurochemicals all day long, but when you give a gift to someone, you get a double boost of both oxytocin, the love hormone that helps build relationships with people and gives you feelings of trust and safety and connection. And receiving gifts also releases those two hormones. Just imagine for a second if one side of that equation was broken. Because that's what we're going to be examining today. So, is gift giving bad? No, not at all. Giving gifts is a pro-social behavior. It is a huge win for our species and for you as a person to give gifts with your whole heart when you're capable of doing that. But on an individual level, we can easily become addicted to those neurochemicals and those emotional responses to gift giving rather than the actual enjoyment of the process of giving gifts. That in itself is a problem. And that's not going to be the topic of the video today. But if you're giving a gift specifically to invoke that feeling, that's a form of addiction. And it can be a form of addiction. It's not probably the kind of addiction where you would need a 12-step program or a therapist for. It's probably something that you could overcome on your own, given enough time and resources. But again, off topic. Really, what we're looking at is what happens when you have very low self-esteem. So, um, I suffered from very low self-esteem growing up. Uh, there for a variety of reasons. And when you have low self-esteem, you're constantly looking for external validation in yourself because you don't have any of that internal validation. And when I use the words external validation versus internal validation, what I mean is external validation is what happens in a social situation where um, you where someone else is expressing their validation of you. Validation would be their feeling of gratitude and recognition of being responsible for a positive or desired event or outcome or participation in a relationship. So if you're validated in a relationship, like someone gives you a gift, that's a form of external validation. When you lack self-esteem, you can't receive that gift. It doesn't feel true. The reason for that is actually the other form of validation, which is internal validation. Internal validation is the process in which you create your own feeling of gratification, your own feeling of recognition, of being responsible for positive outcomes that you see and recognizing those positive outcomes. If it helps, I came up with this rather silly analogy earlier today. I live in the Pacific Northwest, and one of our holiday traditions here, there's a store here. In other parts of the world, it's Kroger, but here in Pacific Northwest, it's Fred Meyer. And they have a tradition of selling on a very specific day, right after our other holiday that we just talked about, gratitude, after Thanksgiving. They have a sock day. And the sock sale is a great day to get trampled if you get in the way of an old lady wanting to get her socks. But regardless, my analogy about this is you have a pair of really nice socks, right? One of those socks is representative of that external validation, and the other sock is your internal validation. And when you do your laundry, you pull those socks out of the dryer and you match them up, and that's how you release that oxytocin. That's how the gift giving process normally works. But when you're missing that internal validation piece, the sock that you receive from someone has no match. There's no self-esteem to pair that sock up with. So it feels false and it feels like you're unworthy. and it triggers an emotional response of shame. And that emotional response is specifically related to shame, right? It's specifically related to this overwhelming sense of lack of self esteem combined with this gratitude that you're receiving that you just don't believe. You don't have that matching sock. And so, this is a philosophy that we've been developing at Connor's Coaching for a while. And it comes down to a very simple quote from RuPaul: if you can't love yourself, how in the hell are you going to love anyone else? And we want to add to that: if you can't love yourself, no amount of love expressed by any other person is ever going to feel real. Now, there is a way to fix this, and we're going to go over that today. I have a recipe specifically to address this issue, and it involves giving back to yourself. So, if we are going to give gifts as a form of social bonding and we receive any form of external gratitude, if we're lacking that internal validation process, if we have low self esteem, if we're suffering from that, no amount of love is going to ever feel validated. You just have to throw away those empty socks. So, the alternative here is to never give, never receive. And that's missing out on a huge portion of life. There is something to be said about giving from the bottom of your heart. And I have no problem giving gifts. It's the receiving them that I have a hard time with. It doesn't matter how nice the gift I give is. It oftentimes triggers that emotional response in me when I receive a gift because of that internal validation that I'm lacking. So the way that I combat this with is through the love languages and is through some self-care. And I call this pro-social self-validation. So we're triggering those pro-social tendencies. We're triggering gift giving that we would normally do for someone else, but we're doing it for ourselves. So I want to start with affirmation, which is one of the languages of love. And in affirmations, you're expressing out loud, verbally, or in writing, how much the other person is meaning to you, what they mean to you, and etc. With this method, the easiest way to do it is to practice in front of a mirror, to stare deeply into your own eyes in the mirror, which can be a very uncomfortable experience, and to remind yourself that you're worthy verbally, out loud, so that you can hear it. Tell yourself that you are loved and that I love myself. The more you do this, the easier it will be, and the more it will have an impact on your life. You can also do this through journaling daily with daily affirmations of, writing in a book, I love myself, and here's what I'm going to do today. Okay. So that's another trick, but specifically the prosocial behavior, that eye contact is very helpful for releasing that oxytocin, which we know, and eventually it can help you build some momentum around the affirmations. The next one is spending quality time. Now, if you were doing this with someone else, this looks like sitting down with them for a nice meal, chatting with them about everything and nothing, watching a movie together, or going on a date, or just calling them on the phone. And or answering when they call you rather than letting it go to voicemail and then texting them. So with yourself, spending time looks like practicing a hobby or learning something new, like a new language, or spending time gazing in your own eyes in the mirror. You don't have to stop. You can combine the two. So we did talk about gazing with the affirmations. That's kind of my way of pairing these two together. It's that gazing yourself in the mirror, maybe even flirting a little bit with yourself. If you never did this as a kid, you're going to make me feel weird and awkward, because I did. Um So the next the next love language that we're going to talk about is service. So service is where you do an action specifically that benefits another person that isn't necessarily something that's enjoyable, but is something that's beneficial, like cooking a nice meal or cleaning the house or picking your house up and keeping it tidy. And that specifically, keeping your house tidy and picking it up is probably the best place to start if you're on this road for self esteem. I can tell you that there's a YouTube personality out there called Aura Katerina. Um, let me while I'm doing this, I'm gonna multitask, which I try not to do, but I want to see if I can find her so that I can tell you specifically who she is. Um, yeah, it's Ori Katerina, Aurikatarina, and she is a cleaning person. She focuses on helping people clean. One of the things that you learn by watching her show is that because she does it for free, she does it for people who have extremely dirty filthy houses, and she does it as an act of kind of giving back to them. She cleans their house. She used to be a professional cleaner, and one of the things that you hear about, because she tells you the story of the person who owns the house, so that you can empathize with them, is almost every single one of them has a lack of self-esteem. There's usually some other form of dysfunction going on, like an addiction or, you know, recovering from a severe financial trauma or something like that. That's in addition to that. But the self esteem is really central, I believe, to the state of their house. So if you're suffering from self esteem, getting your house clean and getting your house tidy might just be the very first step on a long road of recovery for you. Just saying. I don't know what your house looks like, but if you were to tell me, you have some self-esteem issues, that would be a guess, right? And if that feels judgmental to you, I apologize because it's not my intent. Um, but I want you to look at yourself as someone who matters, as someone who deserves a clean environment, as someone who deserves a healthy environment, as someone who deserves the effort that you put into picking up after yourself so that you can enjoy that space later. So the act of service, I think, is probably the most important. Again, that may be stilted because because that is the primary form of love language for my family, right? Okay, we can move on. Let's talk about physical for a second. This would be eating healthy. This would be exercising. This would be breathing and meditating, making sure that your blood pressure is good, going to regular doctor's appointments. And with all of these tips, with the specifically with the acts of service and with these physical um, tips are the physical self validations. It's very important that you're conscious about the giving as well as the receiving. And we're going to talk about the receiving in a second because we're going to add on a sixth love language just specifically for the acts of self love. But in this case, an act of service that you just do out of habit isn't going to fulfill that need that you have for feeling that as an act of service. It's just a habit that you did mindlessly and that you're not going to appreciate. But if you take a second to remind yourself that the reason that you're doing it, the reason that you're eating healthier, the reason that you're exercising, the reason that you're um, trying a new diet because you want to try something that's healthier than what you've been doing. And when I say diet, I don't mean a fad, I mean a healthy meal. Um, when you're doing that on a conscious level, you're reminding yourself that this is a gift that you're giving. eventually you're going to trigger that oxytocin and dopamine for yourself. You're going to get that self validation. That's so important for gift giving. And then finally, we have gifts, the reason for the season, right? And here's the trick, because giving yourselves gifts can be a reward for bad behavior as easily as it can be a reward for good behavior. I know because I've seen people with diabetes who crave sugar. I've done this myself. I have diabetes from years of personal neglect from before I learned these lessons the hard way. Um, that when you give yourself a gift that is unhealthy, it is not a gift. So giving yourself a healthy personal gift on occasion in a way that doesn't take away from any other part of your life is important. And finding out what that looks like is going to be different for each person. But um, some examples might be, let's say you're really into cooking. That's a hobby of yours. Maybe a gift that you could give yourself so that you could spend some more time doing that with yourself is a cookbook of a cook that you really like, or a journal with a nice cover. You know, hey, if you really want to make yourself feel better in the long run, journaling can be a game changer around that. I'm never going to stop talking about journaling. Maybe if you held a gun to my head, I'd stop talking about journaling, but only until the gun went away. And one of the things that you want to avoid specifically for this activity is any form of gift giving for yourself that triggers a dopamine release. So, dopamine is one of the neurochemicals that's released during gift giving. We want to trigger the gift giving dopamine. We don't want to trigger dopamine from another source. So, we want to avoid drugs and alcohol because drugs and alcohol trigger dopamine releases. We want to avoid food based gifts. Anything that tastes good will trigger dopamine. Dopamine is involved in all forms of pleasure. So if you find pleasure in eating, if you enjoy like gelato, I know I have a viewer that enjoys gelato. That isn't a good gift to give yourself as a rewarding behavior, because what you're doing is you're rewarding the craving. You're not actually rewarding um, you're not actually rewarding yourself. You're not actually validating yourself at that point. So we suggest avoiding any form of gift that triggers a dopamine release. So this would be any form of storytelling, video games, movies, or television, or books, novels. Unfortunately, those probably would not make good personal gifts for yourself. Great gifts for other people, but not great gifts when you're trying to rebuild your self esteem. The next one, and then again, food and drugs and alcohol would be the other major no nos. The other one that you can kind of get into a trap here is a little difficult. Dopamine can be triggered when you go out shopping. The act of shopping is a manic act for some people, and it can trigger a dopamine reaction. It can make you feel good or euphoric when you charge that credit card and get yourself something really nice. I'm not saying that you can't do that, but there are two things to do if you're going to give yourself something with a monetary tag attached to it. The first is, can you afford it without making any other sacrifices? If you can't, then it's probably not a gift, it's probably more of a curse. The second one is making sure that you're not giving the gift to yourself at the moment that you're purchasing the gift. If you're purchasing the gift and that's triggering a dopamine reaction, give that a time to settle down before you give yourself the gift. And then give yourself the gift consciously. And then the last thing I want to talk about in this area for this pro social self validation is receiving a gift. Taking time to thank yourself is very important, because as important as it is to trigger the oxytocin for giving the gift, it's also important to trigger the oxytocin for receiving it. And that receiving that gift is very uncomfortable for other people. If you can't receive a gift from yourself, how are you going to receive a gift from other people? Kind of goes back to that, right? So practicing that on yourself can make it more comfortable to receive a gift from someone else. Thanking yourself for that gift. If possible, verbally stating why it was that you did this for yourself and what it meant to you. And reminding yourself with those affirmations that you're worth it and you love yourself. You know, when we're giving gifts to other people, make sure we're not looking for that internal gratification. It's also probably a good idea that we're not giving gifts for external gratification either, because that can become a loop as well. But this is about giving validation to someone else. That's true giving. And the final thing that I want to say is I've worked with a lot of clients where their primary issue is feeling like they can't spend any time on themselves, feeling like, you know, it, other people can do this, but if I do this for myself, I mean, who am I? Who am I to enjoy time? Or who am I to give myself a spa day? Who am I to give myself an expensive gift? If you're not taking care of yourself, remember, you're not able to love other people if you can't love yourself, right? That's the fundamental principle here. If you can't love yourself, how in the world you're going to love anyone else? I sincerely love this program, and I am so grateful that I have an opportunity to make it. And I just want to thank you so much for being here. Happy holidays to you. And since you stuck around this long, it would be a huge gift for me if you signed into YouTube and subscribed to our channel. Hit the like button and left a comment about what it is that inspired you the most about today's video. What kind of gifts are you going to give yourself? That'd be an awesome comment to see as well. And I really hope to see you again next week. It'll be our last episode for the year, and we're celebrating a 1 year anniversary of the show being on with our very first guest coming back, Leslie King, and she's going to talk to us about avoiding imposter syndrome and what that looks like. So I will see you then, and I wish you the very best.